coach because I'll be teaching this class. This class is going to be about the Naiji, and this class is actually an outreach program of the Naiji Temple. So this also acts as the beginning of creating a temple, a home, a crib for the Naiji of planet Earth. All the Naiji of planet Earth, all you wonderful, wonderful humans of that particular mojo, the mojo I am, Naiji. This is for you. This is to teach you what you are and how you work and how to get out there in the world, and also teach others how to respect us. And that brings in the second reason we're here and the other audiences that could be watching this, which is fans of the Naiji. Those who have studied Podler theory, they are familiar with their mojo, and they are familiar with the mojo Naiji, and they'd like to get to know more about it. And we'd like to offer that so that the Naiji can get along very, very well with the rest of the tribe of humanity. That also brings in to those who are not familiar with Podler theory. You may have found us because you are a curious seeker. You need to be a friendly curious seeker, because this is a special place, this is a sacred place, so the Naiji can feel safe, they can learn about themselves and also teach others. So imagine that we have in our minds here a temple, and it is dedicated to the Naiji, but we have a classroom area that actually is open to the public, and the public can see some of the classes that we do. So both that they can be educated on the way the Naiji learns, and actually the Naiji can meet and greet and talk with them about the Naiji ways. But that is the focus here, Naiji and how they work and what's going on with them. But you'll need to be respectfully curious. If you do that, then we would like to be very generous with our information. But we are shy creatures, us Naiji, although we can pretend to be otherwise. So, respectfully curious, and then you can stay and hopefully make some of the best friends you'll ever meet. Watching this series, the Naiji Temple series, will be confusing to you to a large degree if you are not familiar with the basic terminology and concepts and principles of Podler theory. So we have a whole series, a vlog series called Podler Planet, which is to teach you the actual general principles that apply to all humans and all mojo designs and how they work, such as powers, human design, things of that nature. For example, I'm a Naiji. You need to know what Na and Ji are. You need to know why that makes me the mojo that I am, and that will be something that you'll learn in general principles in the Podler Planet series. So you want to make sure that you're watching all of those episodes, because I'll be referencing those principles. So once those episodes come out in Naiji Temple, we'll be talking about how it works for Naiji. But the given is you understand all the general principles that have been put out that apply to everyone. Also, as teaching about being a Naiji, you're going to need to know how you read one. How does one spot one? Particularly for the fans of Naiji, you want to know how you read one. However, reading is not going to be the focus here, although we'll be teaching how to read Naiji, and also as a Naiji, how you use your powers, Naiji, Zai, and Vi, how you use those powers to read, because they're different than the other powers of the psyche. Therefore, we have an entire series dedicated to this. It's called The Mojo Show, and it really focuses on, within the whole general principles of Podler theory, how to read mojo, specifically how you read the soul designs of other humans. So we will be touching on that frequently here. The cues that Naiji give off, all the subtle little riffs and different ways their mojo gets used. And you'll need to be familiar with the current general principles of mojo reading. So we have a show for that. And you want to focus your attention on those principles so you can apply them to being a Naiji. Also, there will be a whole series, vlog series called Empire of Enlightenment, and that will be dedicated to the Podler principles and concepts that are focused on applying it in the world, which brings into mind the other models of thought that are allies and competitors of our thought. Just like any time you bring a new scientific theory in, there are other theories that are already in the marketplace, and so you want to see how that works and how you line up with them. One thing to throw in there, I am very, very HSP. This has been mentioned in other episodes. For this reason, I have special needs that need to be attended to as far as interacting with the public. For this reason, I have 3 of my advanced students who are in charge of this other series. Nija is working on Nija is working on the Podler Planet series. Jailin, she's working on the Mojo Show series, and Zai Neodemus, he's working on the Empire of Enlightenment show. On my show, you may see them frequently coming in on the forum boards, discussing things, helping the public get oriented, as I'm not super comfortable with actually talking out publicly. So hope you guys are cool with that, and they're very, very awesome people, and they are very, very trained, and they're doing a great job. So you'll want to actually be nice to them, and that will help me stay better connected with you. Now we'll go over sort of a synopsis or a quick orientation, a flyby of a lot of the major concepts and principles that we'll be discussing here in Naiji Temple. So all the goodies that we're going to get into, and there are quite a lot of them. Let's start with Nai. As a Naiji, that's my source power. Nai is like speculation, envisioning, making predictions, things of that nature. So it's the source power for being a Naiji, so this permeates our life. As a Naiji, this is going to be the thing that overrides everything else and flavors everything else, so you want to become very, very familiar with it and make it your friend, although it's a very mysterious friend. Next up here we have Tandem Ji, being a Naiji. It's our second power. This is going to help us connect to the world, steer it, make it go where we want, help us understand people, help us understand how they work and therefore how we should be, give us a code of conduct. Although being under Nai, it'll be a eccentric sometimes and artistic code of conduct, but it's a code of conduct and it is very important to us. Our third rank power, our offside power, is Zai. That is our internal logic. It keeps our passions and our visions from completely throwing us off the board, from dunking us in such a way that we never come back up. Without that, we would go off our rails. So it helps us to keep equilibrium, although equilibrium is not something that's ever going to be something we can keep for very long or should keep for very long, because different mojos use the powers differently and gain energy differently. Being a Naiji, that means I'm going to gain energy, we'll talk about that in a minute, from using these powers. Zai, very important to me, but it doesn't give me as much energy as over here. But without it, my momentum powers would go off the rails. So it's extremely important that I have it, and I'm very grateful that I have it. So thank you, natural law. Ooh, now we have Polar V, our fourth power over here, V. This is, I mentioned before with Zai, that is a logic-based discernment, an internal discernment, so that's how I keep equilibrium, with a logic-based discernment. Up here, you need a way to register stimulus in the world. Being a Naiji, that means I use V. And if I use V, and I'm a Naiji, guess what you use? That's right, same thing. V is how we take in the stimulus from the world, and for us it's going to be literal perceptions, kinetic perceptions. So a lot of Naiji will actually have a very strongly developed aesthetic sense. They don't necessarily have to be an artist per se, but they'll have a strong aesthetic sense. We'll also have a strong sense of visceral aversions, so that those go hand in hand. So if you're a Naiji, that may be familiar to you. Again, going back to Zai, which a lot of Naiji like to use a lot, it's like Zai, Zai, Zai. There's a reason for this. Because having V as the polar power means that the world is going to overstimulate you or hyperstimulate you a great deal, and so that has to be kind of like controlled to keep yourself from getting into trouble. That's why you need a temple, because most mojos don't have the ability to flow the way they're supposed to flow, because they get in trouble for it when they go through the learning process. The learning process to get to where they could fly like, you know, an eagle or whatever, by the time they get to that, they would have caused so much problem in their environment that it makes taking that journey seem non-viable. All humans possess the human design, which is discussed in the Podlair Planet series. As a Naiji, I have a human design, such as having Nai, Ji, Zai, and V. That's variables on a basic set of mathematical principles that apply to all humans. So I work the way I work because all the humans work the way they work. So although it's a temple about Naiji, we're also going to be studying how we can become aware of our connection to all the other humans, how we work similarly, and where our bonds are, what our connection points are, and how to accentuate them and optimize them. So it's not just going to be like Naiji is the greatest thing ever. We are. In our storyline, we are the greatest thing ever, but there are other storylines, and our ultimate goal is to merge our storylines with those other storylines of all the humans for productive harmony. And then we really have done a heroic job, and that's why we're here. As a Naiji, I gain momentum, increase my energy whenever I use conceptualizing, thinking big thoughts, trying to dream of how things could be or might have been, detective work of that nature, speculative detective work. And also Ji, when I try and figure out how humans work, why we believe the things we believe, why we do the things we do. And also moving people to what we think are better ways. Since we seem to see ways that might actually be advantageous, we want to help people get there. And then we also move people out of our way when they try and stop us from being all we can be. You know, it's important to us. It's important to everyone. As a Naiji, that means that I and all you other Naiji out there have Zai and Vi as our modulation powers. That's going to be basically logical feasibility. Our Zai is going to allow us to take the visions that we see, take the passions and opinions that we have, and see if those things are viable. Both, are they viable for logical application, and then V, do I have the energy for this? Do I have the worldly resources for this? Do I have the visceral skills to actually make that possible? And if not, could I? So there's an ongoing dialogue between the momentum of the Nai and Ji and the modulation of the Zai and Vi. But it's a dialogue that if it wasn't there, Naiji couldn't do all the great and amazing things that we can do. So we're able to do them specifically because of having those four powers, have them talk to each other, and in that way. So it can be sometimes uncomfortable, but that is in large part because of misunderstanding the process. It will take a lot of discomfort away by understanding how you work as a Naiji, and the discomfort that remains, I'm not going to lie to you, we are dissatisfied, we'll get to that in a second, but there becomes an understanding of how to live a life as a Naiji, and that feeling you get of dissatisfaction is actually your friend, your oldest, dearest friend. So it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. We have things to prove it. Yes, we do. Naiji, you can be proud of that. You can be proud of a lot of stuff. It's important to have a good understanding and relationship with your modulation powers, because when you're put under heavy stress or output, or stress from heavy output, so there is certain ways that your modulation powers will alert your momentum side that you're having a problem. And you need to be familiar with those, just like if you had a facility that you worked in, you want to be familiar with how you exit the building when certain alarms go on for fires or whatnot. So it can be quite alarming, some of the things that your modulation powers will alert you to or stress upon you, but you need to listen to them to the degree of how to alleviate the stress, and also to what your limits are, because your modulation powers have a lot to do with learning what your limits are. So it's sort of like, first know thyself, then know your limitations. That's your modulation. Your modulation powers let you know that maybe you would like to believe that people can fly, but they can't. You tried it out, you tried to do some visceral, real-world logical experiments, and it doesn't work out. But it doesn't mean it can't. Maybe if you make some wings, hand glide, it's possible, but you have to do some things. You have to modulate in order to get that flight that you were looking for. Which brings up the concept, briefly, of keening. Keening is when the modulation powers have been exerted a lot, and the state that they're in and the message they send to you. We call that keening. And the keening has various stages, which can lead into what we call stress lock. So as an IG, you're going to actually find overemphasis on logic and practicality to be de-energizing. That may surprise a lot of Naiji, because a lot of Naiji have incredibly formidable logic-based powers. A lot of them actually have very powerful visceral powers. But it's important to note where they come from, what drives them. If you overuse those powers and you don't feed them properly with the momentum powers, there are a lot of stress lock behaviors, breakdowns that will happen. You'll lose fluidity of your mind, expansiveness of mind. There are health issues that go with actually being overmodulated and keening for too long and going to stress lock. So as an IG, you may experience, for example, different physical sensations of feeling good or bad, like your energy levels fluctuate. You want to learn what causes that, because IG tend to be extremely energetic when they are lined up correctly, but when they're not, then they have very low energy. And even still, you will have swings. IG tend to have more swings in their energy levels than other mojos for a variety of reasons that we'll talk about throughout this series. As you stated earlier, we will be talking about how you read an IG. So at this point, the given is that you understand the basic principles of mojo reading, and so I'll just kind of go over them now. The first gear of mojo reading is reading the physiological cues, like how the face moves, how the hand moves, all those kinds of things, based on what's going on in the psyche, one power to one cue. So, I am an IG who has Xi and V modulation. That means when I tilt my head to the left here, when I look to my left, particularly the looking, that's the main thing to focus on. Looking up left, this left, down left, blinking to the left. That means I'm accessing my Na. It means I'm speculating. And you'll see a more cunning expression come over my face. You'll want to learn what that looks like. I am one of you if you're an IG, and if you're one of the fans, this is an IG. This is what one looks like. So whenever I'm doing that, throughout the series, know that you're seeing Na. Na is happening whenever I'm looking off to the left. I'm not looking at that wall. Now I am. I'm now looking at that wall, but I wasn't before. I'm just drifting. I'm actually disengaging from the environment. So that means I'm using my speculator. Next, Xi. I'm talking right now, particularly I'm trying to make sense to you. I'm making sentences with beginning, middle, and end. That's me using my values-based objective discernment to communicate with you, to structure thoughts in such a way that other people besides myself can understand. So look for that. I'm a basic human zoo exhibit for you. So throughout this series, whenever you see me talking like this, I'm using my Xi. Also, when I move forward, like so, when I project forward, any forward-leaning motion, particularly jutting, that's my Xi. My Xi likes to punctuate, like beginning, middle, end. See, I punctuate there? I punctuate with my hand. I punctuate it with my voice. I often will punctuate with my head a little bit. That's a use of objective discernment, and as an IG, that's my Xi. So whenever you see me doing that, I want you to feel a little red. Red, red. See that? I look off there, blue, blue. Get used to that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time teaching that as much as Jailene is in her series, but you should be familiar with that work, and I'll be referencing it a lot. And you have an example to see me in action. So I'm just saying right now, this is what you'll be seeing, as well as when we have other Naiji on this show, once they have proven themselves to be skilled enough to present themselves to the public. Next we have Xi. When you see my eyes going to the right, like this, I'm accessing my Xi. When any Naiji does that, so if you are a Naiji, that's what you're doing when you do that. If you've been read by one of our qualified readers as a Naiji, then that's what you're doing when you go to the right. Also, any of the samples that I give you on this show were given out by Jailene in her show about who the Naiji are. When you're looking at them, every single one, all the men, all the women, every single one, when they're going to the right, that's their Xi. Left, Nai, jutting, talking, and Xi. Make sense? Good. Lastly up here we have V. As an IG, I have V, as do you. That means that when I am moving my body around and animating it, that has a lot to do with your objective perception power. And so as an IG, you should learn this. My movements have a certain crispness to them that is different than the mojos that have Ni. Okay, so there are 16 basic designs. 8 of them use V, either as modulation like I do, or they use V primarily. All those mojos will actually have this crisperness in the movement, regardless of being directive or adaptive, logical or values-based. They'll have that crispness. What else? When the lifting of the carriage, that signals the V being used. You'll see sort of a flashing eyes, like this, like I've really locked on. I'm tracking like a fast-moving object, like a ball or a dog running. That's my V being used. And you'll note that all the Naiji have this exact same quality, although they use it differently, they style it differently, they have their own, dance moves. But still, that will be what happens when they perk up their eyes, when they lift their carriage, when they start to move their body. That's V. Gear 2 of Mojo reading is basically when you take two powers of the human design of a given mojo and note how that affects physiological cues. So for example, as a Naiji, my top two powers are over here. That means that I am directive. And so as a directive mojo, like all directive mojos, I have more comfortability using yang gestures. See? Directing, pointing, moving, claw-like, karate, yes? Okay. Then you have yin gesturing, which is palms in as opposed to palms out. Keeping closer to my space. I can do this, but this is less natural for me. This is actually bringing in my Zai in a way, and also my V, which is more reactive. And reacting for me is not the stronger psychic position. My stronger psychic position is more actively watching and then actively making moves over, based on what I've observed. That's what gives me energy. So for example, teaching this course, talking to you, I do get energy from that despite the fact that I am very, very nervous. For example, right now, the environment is affecting my V, and the fact that I don't want to give a bad set of instructions to you is heavily activating my Zai. So those things are actually going to reduce my energy to some degree, but I'm still getting a lot of energy because I enjoy talking about things I think are useful truths, and I like sharing them with people that I respect and admire and love. And so I have people like that here with me today, and so I have those also out there, Naiji, who are watching this. Therefore, these are going to be more momentum for me. So when you see my hands moving in this way, that's more momentum. As anytime you see my head on the left, that's going to be momentum as a directive. Head on the right, or yin gesturing, that's going to signify that I am actually using modulation. And that'll be the same for all other Naiji. Another part of the second gear is talking about the difference between directive and adaptive mojos. So not only am I directive as an Naiji, I am subjective because my power is back here, my Nai and my Zai. The first rank power and the third rank power, they are heavier in my psyche. They affect things stronger than the second rank power combined with the fourth rank conscious power. So for that reason, you're going to see natural refinement. Staying still is easy and natural for me. I can even gain a lot of energy by staying still, as opposed to moving. Like if I don't think about it, I don't naturally animate my body. My body animates when I consciously think about it more. As Naiji, we are perceivers. Perception first, because Nai is part of the perception corridor, so that turns on before the discernment corridor, where our Ji is. So our Ji is very important to us, but it comes on after the Nai, and it's subordinate to the Nai. As Naiji, we are interpretive mojos. This means that we use Nai, interpretive power, over V, a literal power. So we have both kinds of perceptions. We have literal and interpretive perceptions, but the interpretive ones, they come first. Although a lot of Naiji are unaware of this, which gets into how we get misread often by people. Whoops, I almost forgot to tell you that being an interpretive means that I have a syncopated rhythm in my face, which is kind of hard to put words to, except that I'm having a second conversation. Can you tell this? All humans kind of have that quality, but it depends on how highly ranked their interpretive power is. Having it as a source power, it's quite pronounced, and you'll notice that I have cunning eyes. These are Nai cunning eyes that also say that I am interpretive. As Naiji, we are also values-based. This means that we have a values-based power over our logic-based power. The values-based power is Ji, logic-based power is Zai, and we have both. We have both kinds of discernment, but one has to take precedent, and for us, it is this. That means that in the face, you're going to see that my emotive expression, it comes up easily above the midline, as all Naiji do. although I can stone face very, very well. Again, most Naiji can stone face very, very well, but that is a modulation, despite how good we are at it. As Naiji, you have all 8 of the powers. We also have Ni, Jai, Zi, and Vi, but those are in our unconscious, and we'll talk about a lot about on this series about how to get in touch with those, both inside yourself and in others, and how to treat them, and how one gets along best with them, so that you can recognize that you actually have all 8 of those powers, and that they're good, and that all the other people that you interact with, they also do have all the 8 powers, and they're good, and they're good in different ratios. So you have a particular ratio, Ni, Ji, Zai, and Vi, that is the conscious portion of your ratio, and then you have the Ni, Jai, Zi, Vi, the unconscious portion of it. But together, you have the whole thing, which is what all humans were built to be, a whole thing. As Naiji, we have Nai back here, but we also have Vi, but Vi being about memories, stored data, exact information, practical considerations. It tends to have a very different worldview agenda than Nai does, but actually it is one agenda, although a portion of it is unconscious and therefore it seems foreign to us. So getting over that foreignness is a big part of the compositional relationship, but it expands your mind greatly, and it really takes you to another level as a hero. How your unconscious powers talk to each other, how the Naiji, how our powers talk to the less conscious Zai and Vi, and how we talk to the even less conscious Ni, Jai, Zi, and Vi. That makes up what we call our peak pathway. All humans have a peak pathway. It's part of being a human. It's part of our human design, which is a methodology for accessing all the powers you have in the most ideal way based on your given design. So for us, our peak pathway is, in conscious order, Nai, Ji, Zai, Vi, Ni, Jai, Zi, Vi. But there's lots of ways of doing it. There's also the energetic order, which is Nai, and then Ni, and then Ji, and then Jai, and then Zai, and Zi, and then Vi, and then Vi. I know, does it look fun? It is fun. It's your psyche. Go have fun with it. A key way we use in Podler theory to help you access the various parts of yourself is through social alchemy groupings. This is a way of understanding how you and your mojo get along with everyone else. So as Naiji, we have certain mojos that we actually have more mathematic familiarity with, and so it'll be easier to have an energetic exchange, but we actually have very rewarding and advantageous ways of exchanging energy with all the mojos. The first social alchemy group that you'll talk about is recognition, and that's actually your own mojo. So for Naiji, that's Naiji Temple, what we're doing right here in this series. It's based on everything about and for the Naiji mojos of planet Earth, including subdivisions of that, such as the Naiji female, the Naiji male, different sexual orientations, and different age groups and rifts and everything. So it's honored completely as a design, and then all its various facets are honored and respected as well. This immediately begins your learning process because other humans, even if they have the exact same design as you, they're radically different people, and they use your design differently than you do, and you learn so much about what you want to do with your own mojo when you see all the variety or taste of incredible variety that is possible with your mojo. So that's how it starts with recognition, but then expands from there and all the others. So I'll go over those real quick, and that'll be a nice way to get you started on what it is Naiji are. I've kind of gone over our powers just real briefly on that, and kind of what we look like real briefly, and now I'm going to give you a little taste of kind of like the work we do in order to help expand your mind. So social alchemy is one of those main tools, and we'll go over the rest of the groupings right now. Recognition is followed up by inspiration, and that's where you have a temple that is dedicated to yourself, us Naiji, go Naiji, but also to the Nijai. The Nijai is the other mojo that makes up the other half of the Nejez storyline. Nejez is actually the combination storyline of the Naiji and Nijai together. So by being around your unconscious portion of your storyline in human form, yes, major upgrades to your psyche, to your well-being, to your enlightenment. So that's what we want to have, and That's the kind of training that is essential for humans to do in order to level up as heroes, and that's what we're going to make happen in Pod Lair. And Naiji Temple, that's our first position. We're going to actually make Naiji Temple. We're going to build it up really cool, and once we build that up really cool, we'll use our sway, our heroic powers, to fill out the rest. And that'll start with the Nijai. So once we've actually rescued a whole bunch of Naiji from the world of not knowing what they are and how to use their powers, we're then going to form a team to go rescue Nijai, so we can then have Nijez. Saving other people, saving our own mojos, saving our inspirational mojo, that's really awesome. But really, just saving people in general is awesome, so let's actually keep saving more people. Kind of like a superhero team. Naijis tend to really be into, you know, superheroes, whether they're comic book or historical or simply artistic or revolutionary. It doesn't matter. The question is they are trying to save the world in some capacity. That's very impressive to us, and we'd like to figure out how we can contribute to saving people. Starting ourselves, our loved ones, and then everyone else. In order to do that, we'll obviously have to have our best powers. Okay, as Naiji, we start off being pretty darn cool with the Nai, and that then is pushed out in the Ji. But there's another power, Z for us, that actually can link up with the Nai, and you can be a visionary. But instead of like a visionary like with the humanistic, so a humanistic visionary is Naiji, we have the Nai Z, and they are visionary logicians. So their powers really stack up great with ours. We tend to have dialogues that get along well, and we can profit from each other's abilities and where they shore up our weak spots. So we get along really well, but we can really fill in weak spots of each other's, which is excellent. Inverse Mojo. In this series, you'll hear me talking a lot about the direct romantics, what we call the Durams, you know, for short, and I'll straight with you. And that is the Naiji, what we are, us Naiji, but also we have some very close compadres who are the Ji Nai. And they actually share a very strong bond with us because they have the same momentum compound. They also have the same modulation compound, just in a different ratio. And so they help us expand ourselves a great deal, particularly in our objective powers, and we can help them a great deal with their subjective powers because we are so closely designed, but we do actually have that crucial but very special difference that actually allows us to be like really great and special friends for each other. There are all kinds of groupings, so these groupings are not just on individuals, like for example a Naiji with a Jinai or Naiji with a Naizi. It gets larger groupings, so you can have any size grouping until you include all humans. So we'll start with getting into the quartets. We're part of a source song quartet called the Nez Alpha. You'll hear me throwing that term around a lot. Oh, that's Nez Alpha, or something of that nature, like that person is Nez Alpha, or that's so Nez Alpha. Okay, that's actually because that means that you have Nai or Ni as your top power, which means your unconscious genius also has Nai or Ni as its source power, whatever one you don't have consciously. And for that reason, all the mojos that are Nez Alpha, the Nai Ji, the Nai Z, and then the Ni Jai and Ni Zai, those mojos actually share a love for change. They get excited by change and pretty much have the lowest tolerance for repetition. So the special bond we have, we bond on being changelings, and it's fun to actually have all these little fun clubs that you can be in. So that's kind of like the club of like your source power. Actually, technically, it's the club of your source power channel. Your source power club, that would be, for example, being the same source, like the Nai Alpha, Nai Ji, and Nai Z. Next, you have the storyline quartet. This is another one we'll talk about a lot for the Naiji is romantic. You'll hear me saying romantic this, romantic that, and what it means particularly here is a grouping of social alchemy that includes all the mojos that actually have a interpretive power as their main perception and a values-based power as their main discernment. So that includes the Durams we talked about, the Naiji and the Ji Nai, but also includes the Adrams, the adaptive romantics, the Nijai and the Jai Ni. So they have a kind of special connection based on having those two channels be the ones that they favor consciously. And so we'll talk about that a great deal, how they share certain sensitivities and certain special rewards in the world. There are a few more the social alchemy groupings, at least 20 main ones that we talk about. Some of them we talk about more than others, particularly in certain contexts. But for example, when it comes to production, there's a thing called change flow, and as we are Naiji, we're part of the first wave, which means we like things when they change a lot. I was also mentioned being Nez Alpha, so the 4 mojos that are Nez Alpha are the same 4 mojos that are in the first wave of change flow, because of that propensity for change and that aversion to staying the same or to repetition. We actually call it the special club. That's actually when the language that you speak primarily energetically and the environment you favor most naturally are the same as other mojos. So as Naiji, we share the fact that we, as far as a language, we speak or understand the perception language of interpretiveness, pattern-based perceptions. And the environment that we like to be in to do our pattern surfing is a subjective one. So we tend to prefer a more reflective, lower stimulus environment in order to do our interpretive pattern-based perceiving. These mojos include the Naiji and Naizi we mentioned before, but also the Jaini and the Zaini. As Naiji, we actually have the perception power of Nai as our main one. That's how we see the universe, kind of in insightful, cunning angles, in intuitive hunches and perceptions. There are 4 mojos that do that, the Naiji, the Naizi, but also the Zinai and the Jinai. So all 4 of those mojos use that Nai cunning, and by seeing how different people use the cunning, that can be very, very helpful to us. Then you have discernment. As Naiji, our primary form of discernment is Ji, although many of us have very, very developed Zai. The Ji is interpersonal dynamics, things of that nature, figuring out what people want, why they want them, and how you can affect them in different ways based on that, that understanding. So that includes the Naiji and the Jinai, but also includes the Vaiji and the Ji Vai. They use a different perception power, Vai, but they also share that their main discernment power is Ji, that interpersonal dynamics that concern with the tribe, with one's place in the tribe, things of that nature. So seeing our discernment done in a way different for us or for a different agenda helps to awaken us in how we can use our Ji better, and also what the totality of Ji is for the tribe. Because all the Ji mojos, it's natural to actually think that your way of using Ji is the way. But clearly there's at least 4 distinct ways just among the 4 Ji mojos. Another group you'll hear talk about a lot is the hunters, or the worldview map mojos. Those are the mojos that actually have a power back here as their primary one. That's the Naiji, the Naizi, but also the Vaiji and Vaizi. All 4 of these mojos are hunters, and they share a common bond, a common way of being, although they also are vastly different because what they're hunting is different. So they share commonality being hunters, but what they're hunting, very, very different. A few of the groups that we actually talk about a great deal being Naiji, or you'll hear me speaking about a great deal, is being shades of consciousness. Those are the 4 mojos that have the same 4 conscious powers than we do, but in very different ratios. So the Naiji, the Jinai, but also the Zai V and the V Zai. These mojos are shades of our consciousness, and again, we learn a lot about ourselves and how our powers work by observing them and interacting with them in a positive way. So this is a little taste of what we'll be doing here in Naiji Temple, a little orientation. We're going to have just a couple more episodes of orientation to give you an idea of what we do here. It's quite extensive, so if you're Naiji, this is the best place you can be. I welcome you, and if you have any questions, I look forward to hearing about them, and my people will bring them to my attention, and I will answer them to the best of my abilities, because I'm really eager to meet the heroic Naiji of planet Earth and be friends with you. And so this temple is my gift, and the start of what I hope will be an amazing, unprecedentedly awesome, heroic, super spiffy adventure. Adventure, an adventure that only comes from having good friends that actually want to save the world. So let's do it. Let's actually figure out what the world needs together and then go save it together. Of the Naiji of planet Earth and fans of the Naiji, we're now going to continue with the syllabus overview, and we'll be getting now into some more advanced topics. What makes them advanced is that what you saw in part 1 That gives you sort of the basic human design of the Naiji, our powers, some basic things like how you read us. That's foundational work in order to deal with more advanced topics, for example, spirit forms. Spirit forms, as you should know from watching the theory episodes on Popular Planet, is basically everything that is outside of our conscious understanding, which is a great many things, including all the forces of nature, our unconscious powers, the relationships between ourselves and others, the social alchemy, and many, many more things, mathematical principles, etc. But they relate differently to different mojos, and so we will talk a lot in Naiji Temple about how the particular spirit forms relate to us. Spirit forms often strike some people as a little whiffy. Naiji tend to be cooler with this than most. They tend to be predisposed towards spirituality. However, many Naiji are very into the sciences. That's their particular form of spirituality. So to them, the idea of spirituality is like, no, that's not me. It actually is. It's really an issue of semantics. A good place to begin getting in touch with spirit forms is with your conscious powers. For the Naiji, those are Nai, Ji, Zai, and Vi. These powers, although they are conscious, that's true, and we discussed them in part 1 as if they were like an engine underneath the hood of a car or a ship or something, and that's also true. However, that's more to kind of understand the nuts and bolts of how it operates, but kind of like a car, for example, most of your experience is not doing that. That just sort of happens on its own, and for you, it's more of a driving experience. For humans, that's spirit forming, including your own powers. So for example, if you want to get into your Nai, I get that question from people a lot, is how do I get into a particular power that they have? Like, how do I access that? And the thing that comes up commonly is you need to embody a character. That's the shortest thing. You have to embody a character that does that as part of the character. It's difficult to work powers directly because they can feel weird about that. If you actually like try to work intuition, particularly Naiji. The Naiji should understand this, like work intuition, work charisma. It doesn't really work like that. It's much easier to try and reach out or to become a character that has those qualities as part of its composition. For the Naiji, that is the Nai one-way walker. That is the spirit form, the character in a heroic story that when we embody it, our Nai just naturally turns on and does what it has evolved to do for all this time. So the Nai knows what to do. You just have to contact it. And for us, that's easiest by trying to get into the headspace of the one-way walker. We will do whole episodes on most of these topics we're going to talk about. For example, the one-way walker. We'll do a whole episode just on that. The one-way walker is just one sort of universal label for really a character that the Naiji can play. It's very Nai heavy, and it can be in the future, in the past, it can be in any country, it can be in any career, it can be any non-career, it can be any relationship. The one-way walker can do what it does, which is walk its way. So for all of the pod power spirit forms, they can actually be accessed in any location at any time and be appropriate. But there are always which mode of you, which character of you, which facet of you would be best at a given situation. So if you want to really access your detachment, access your speculation, your visioning, try thinking like a wizard. Try feeling like a wizard. Try doing things that would make you feel like a visionary scientist, like an artist. Any of these things that would make you feel like a person who's going to go their own way and get special insights that you only get from going your way. Next for the Naiji is Ji, the natural law teacher. When the Naiji gets its insights, there's a desire to want to put them into action. And so that can have nearly infinite ways of happening, but the natural law teacher spirit form of the Naiji is built to always do the best appropriate Ji for any situation. And thinking of trying to teach others or yourself through actions will naturally make the Ji turn on very strongly and very nobly. Over here we have the Zai Hardcore Humanist. Many Naiji are actually extremely familiar with the Hardcore Humanist because their life has sort of made them feel, because Naiji have a lot of things to deal with as far as sensitivities and whatnot, they need to be rather hardcore, or they feel the need. So often they identify heavily with that spirit form. And it's good to actually have a strong connection with all your spirit forms, but you need to know that you have all of them and which ones are the leader of the others. For us, it goes in this order. The one-way walker, that is the highest of our conscious pod power spirit forms. It is the one that actually takes lead as far as what the natural law teacher does, and these two, they take lead as far as what the hardcore humanist mode of the Naiji does. These pod power spirit forms and their ranking, for example, can throw people sometimes, because there is the natural ranking, but there's also the situational aspects. So for example, if a situation is actually sending very, 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 very strong signals, acute, high-stakes signals that require your hardcore humanist side to come out, then that can preempt the higher-ranked spirit forms over here, and that's proper as an emergency mechanism. So that's sort of like the CEO of a really cool company that's going to save the world, and now there is a attack upon the company or the tribe or the person, the leader, and so the security team, they come in, they protect the CEO, which is good. They come in, they're hardcore, they don't let anything happen to the CEO. But then they're supposed to get the CEO out of danger, and then the CEO is supposed to go back to taking control of things and being the orchestrator of the destiny of the company. So you don't let the security response team tell the company what to do, although the security response team may take extreme tactical measures in a short period of time in order to save the higher ranked, say, CEO in this analogy. Finally, for the conscious powers, we have V, and for the Naiji, that is embodied by the frenzied fanatic. This can throw a lot of Naiji because they can feel uncomfortable in that state, which means they're not as experienced with it as they should be, because actually being more experienced with your frenzied state allows you to turn on and off more your control and be able to know when will be the best time to do that and what are the options you have. What kinds of frenzy are they? When can you do them? What kind of results can they make for you? Once you understand that, then it's kind of like playing with extremely potent spells. But this is often done, for example, in Naiji, in extremely incredible athletic performances, acting performances, scientific breakthroughs, the ability to actually frenzy in order to just follow something that almost seems like it's inhuman to chase that. But you need to to chase it, and you do what you gotta do. You do what you gotta do. That quality, that's the frenzied fanatic. You will do what you gotta do to chase that vision down. So that's very powerful, but it can be very extreme. So Naiji need to know what it is, otherwise they can get to where they try to chain that down, or they let it out of the box, but they don't do it appropriately. They do it for things that really it's not meant for. As part of Naiji Temple, we will also go into the Elevator of Enlightenment that takes you through all your powers, particularly taking you into the unconscious areas. Your conscious powers and your conscious awareness of them, that is your apparatus. So for us being Naiji, that's going to be mainly made up of Nai and Ji, and with some also Zai and V. And the calling, the unconscious, calling to us of the Ni, Jai, Z, and Vi. That is our basic understanding of us. That's our apparatus. That's what is you. That's what I think of as me. When I think of me, I'm actually thinking of my apparatus, which is my conscious awareness of my powers, which is primarily Ni and G with some Xi and V, and I can feel into my unconscious for the other four. That's what I know of me, and that's what you know of you. It's a question of how much we've expanded that range, but that is the area that I and you work in. There's, of course, the self you know, and then there's the self that you present to the world. This can be a facade, or it can simply be like a facet. Your true self having many facets like a gem, and you present certain facets in certain lights in order to get the best sparkle. For us being Naiji, our awareness is going to be very strongly associated with our insights and how people do things, good and bad, and how much we know of that versus how much we can or should say. There's a disconnect there, and the Naiji of all the mojos has a very strong awareness of the apparatus and Mazout relationship. The Mazout being this facade, this character you play. It's not a bad thing. You need to have that. But for the Naiji, we'll be keenly aware. Having the Nai with the Ji, we're very aware of the behavior you're supposed to do because the environment expects that, but then being piped in a signal from natural law of like what natural law says is supposed to happen. And there's always a compromise of exactly how much you are aware that natural law would like a situation to be versus how much technically and culturally it will allow for at the moment. There's always some sort of discomfiture there. But that's a good thing because that discomfiture that Naiji have allows us to be very aware of our Mazouts, which keeps them more often than not from possessing us. Well, maybe not more often than not, but more often than it does for others. I think all humans actually get possessed by Mazout way more than they should, including the Naiji. But Naiji have tools to be more aware of that than others. We're very aware of the fact that we are an apparatus and that we have a highly developed Mazout system of facets of ourself that we show. We're very aware of what part of ourself, what part of a story, telling a story ABC or CBA or BAC. Naiji think like this. All those are technically true, but depending on which order you tell the story, the audience could have vastly different reactions. So that editing of your behavior and being aware of it, that is our Mazout. Now we have the subconscious powers. This is the powers that are not completely unconscious, but they are fairly unconscious. For us, that is a lot to do with Xi and V. These powers they're conscious. We have a conscious access to them. Like right now, I go to my Xi, I Xi a lot as I need to, but there's a lot of that area I don't have, not consciously. So even though it's a conscious power, as it goes further away from my source, I know less and less of that terrain. So there is a wariness towards going to that area. Naiji may not know this. For example, many Naiji actually are very into the sciences, and so they feel very comfortable in science as far as like logic. But a lot of times it's really the intuitive part of the scientific discovery process that's the more pleasurable. And the logic is something they need to do, although they may be confused about this and would definitely think of themselves as a logic-based mojo. However, whenever a Naiji does this, whether they do it willingly or unwillingly, knowingly or unknowingly, the more time you spend over there, you will get tired and you'll get confused. So you have to keep coming back over here to kind of get more air. If you don't do that, you'll begin to feel innervated. Most Naiji actually feel bouts of intense innervation where they just lose physical energy, like the will to get out of bed, the will to do anything, and then all of a sudden they have intense interest in things, almost too much interest. So a lot of that has to do with being able to know what your spirits are doing. And now as we get over towards the subconscious area, the Daryu area, as we call that, we're getting into areas that if you don't pay attention to them, they can get you out of the blue. They can actually really throw you around because it'll seem like it came out of nowhere. So although I have very strong Zai, I do have to reach for it. See that? I have to reach for Zai. This is a physical, kind of way of showing that I reach for it. That means every time, right there, every time I'm not reaching for it, which I need to do my main powers, there's stuff happening in the logic-based channel that I'm not tracking. As a Naiji, you need to be aware of that. You need to be aware that there is that sort of blind spot for you, and that if you obsess about that blind spot, you'll actually spend all your time doing Daryu and you'll get very, very tired and very, very cranky. Now we have definitely the unconscious powers. For us, that's Ni and Jai. That's our unconscious other. For us, that is the Ni Jai, which will be of, doesn't need to have a gender. It actually is a creature that can be a land, it can be travel, it can be a hobby, it can be a passion, anything like that. But it does often take a physical form, and when that happens, it is of the gender that you would find most attractive. So it is the most appealing creature that your psyche can handle, and just barely. As mentioned in part 1, in peak pathways, you need to be able to access your unconscious powers. You're not going to be able to do it directly. That's the key thing. As I mentioned before, I have Ni and Jai and Zi and Vi, but for me, they're not directly held by the construct I think of as me, which is a Naiji. There is a Ni Jai in my unconscious that if I speak to this creature as an other, then I will get all those gifts. Like, that's how it's designed to work. I'm designed to actually get all the Ni and Jai and Zi and Vi I need by dialoguing with a creature in my unconscious that's in charge of all that. That would be my other. If you are Naiji, you operate the same way. The only difference will be the gender and sexual orientation and the specific manifestations in nature and travel, transportation, anything like that it takes. But the basic powers will be the same for all Naiji, for their other, which is Ni, Jai, Zi, and Vi, and the fact that accessing them is best done by treating it as a friend, your best friend, your lover in your psyche, and that if you dialogue with it like an artist does with a muse, you will get great generosity from this creature. But if you attempt to treat it mechanically, it won't work that well. That's for all people, but definitely Naiji. For Naiji, definitely your muse, your other, is a Ni Jai and likes to be treated accordingly. This is definitely unconscious, it's going deep, deep unconscious, but you can still dialogue with it some, is the Fumasta. For the Naiji, this is when we have all our powers, which is Naiji, Zai Vi, Ni Jai, Zi, and Vi, all together. And we'll talk this later in the filming about synomnia and synesthesia and synesthesion, and those are all true, but it's a bit more of a technical way of understanding the experience. When it actually happens for a Naiji, where you're having like all your powers, you'll feel like a certain kind of person, a certain version of you. That will be the easiest and most constant way for you to actually get in contact with your higher powers, is to actually find out how your Fumasta sees itself in your mind. It will use impressive heroes that you come in contact with through your education in life, and then try and teach you what it wants you to be as far as the best you. When you enact this, you will do the requirements that make that creature in you, that highest you, approve of the way you are living your life. It's very difficult to get Fumasta approval, but if you do, you get the full flood of all your 8 powers as best as you can, which is superhuman, to stay on the highly heroic course that you have chosen. You and your Fumasta will have to dialogue like a mentor to a mentee of what you would need to do, what kind of life decisions you would have to do, what kind of heroic efforts, what kind of rituals you would need to do in order to be the one. That's what your Fumasta does. It tells you what you need to do in order to be the one, and then when you are the one, it gives you all the powers the one deserves. Now we'll do a quick overview of some of the hot topics that will be discussed here in Naiji Temple. There are many topics that will come up. This is just sort of a beginning sample, but when people have come in and Naiji kind of start down this training of finding out about themselves, there have been a few topics that consistently seem to actually garner a lot of attention and interest, and so we want to put them out right from the beginning as a buffet for you. But this is just a starting place. So ask any questions that you want for the Naiji, and I'll do my best to answer them, and we'll open up even new hot topics. In Pod Layer theory, the horography is a way of looking at yourself that includes your pod powers, your spirit forms, social alchemy, all the aspects of you, taking it all in. So you have the greatest, most complete way of looking at your life. So if you were going to life coach yourself, that is the best tool to do. So for the Naiji, that has a special interest. I mean, it's supremely important to all mojos, but the Naiji often feel, of all the mojos, the strongest disconnect between what their way wants, what their mojo want, what their peak pathway wants, what their spirit forms want, that and what the world is asking for, what the world is validating, what the world is paying for these days. So that's something that actually must be accounted for being a Naiji. And the horography will allow you to realize you have to take care of your life, you have to eat food, you have to pay bills, you actually have to put your work out in some way that people can understand you. There are certain things you have to do, but it should come from the context of the horography. And for a Naiji, that will actually mean validating your visions. It'll mean validating your passions and so forth, your imagination, things that will get to logical and practical application, but they have to go the way they go, and your spirits need to be honored in the way they were built. They'll give you everything you need, but you need to honor them in the way they need to be honored. We'll be talking a lot in this series, as well as most of the other series, about the PICN, the Pod Layer Intentional Community Network. That is important for everyone in Pod Layer. It's the vision that we're all striving for, and the Naiji have a particular place in that. So that's a way of actually seeing the way Naiji from all over planet Earth had a common cause, how the powers that they were born with, the gifts that Gaia gave them, that there's a reason, there's a grand cause that all Naiji from planet Earth can rally around. We can all get behind this one. The fact that we're all humans, the fact that we need to all work together as one productive, harmonious tribe, and that's totally possible. And in fact, not only possible, it's the evolved state we're in. We're denying that evolved state. So Naiji, this is our game. This is exactly the part of the ocean pond we swim in, okay, the deep waters. So let's get to it. In Pod Layer theory, you have synamnia, synesthesia, synesthesion. I won't go too much in detail on that. They're done in other filmings. But basically they involve your perceptions and your discernments and all of them together. How you do that, what it feels like, sharing the experiences with other mojo. As Naiji, we'll spend a lot of time talking about what it feels like for one another when we're feeling synesthesia, synamnia, what caused it to happen. Did we do it on purpose? Did it happen accidentally? Did it go the way we thought it would go? Is it something that's one-off? Can it be repeated? We want to share this knowledge, show and tell how we do that. In technical terms, for example, as a Naiji, my synesthesia is, perception, so that's actually going to be my Nai most of the time. But then I do have the V that comes in more consciously, but as far as energetic effect, it's actually Ni. So having the Nai with either the V and or the Ni, that's a common synesthesia for us to have. So the hardest one is back over here, Vi. Getting that fourth perception, that's the deepest and most profound and complete synesthesia for the Naiji. Synesthesion works quite similarly, which is for us Ji, that's our primary decision-making process, our discernment process. But we have Zai, as you talked about, and Ji and Zai, they talk to each other quite a bit. But from the unconscious realm, we actually have Zhai. And Zhai's unconscious for us, but it's actually more powerful energetically than the Zai. So the Zhez is stronger for us than the Zez. But when we're working with synesthesion, in order to have the complete one, you would actually have to have all four. That would include our Ji that we start with, the Zai that we can get to pretty good on our own consciously. Unconsciously, we have Zhai, and then over here we have deep unconscious Z. So Z and Vi, those are the powers that are the furthest for us, and when we get them, allow us to reach the highest forms of synamnia, synesthesia. However, if you go directly for them, if you try to actually just go right for, say, Vi or right for Z, you won't get anything. So you got to kind of think of it sort of like doing a clean and jerk, kind of Olympic lifting, you know, those kind of snatch, clean and jerk. You need to do the move in the right sequence to build momentum in order to sort of fling the weight there. If you try just brute force lift that, you will lift very, very little and you'll get tired quickly. We'll talk a great deal about reading here, as reading mojos is something that is important for all humans to be able to do, but there are degrees of reading, so it's an infinite level you can go to in a discipline. Naiji are going to have the natural gifts and the desire, which is, I guess, another form of gift in this context, of reading mojos, of reading souls. Us, as well as the other Zhez hunter, the Vaiji, we actually, as part of our heroic story, need to be able to read people. So that's a role that we'll be doing quite a bit, and we'll discuss how our configuration, Nai with Ji, Zai and Vi, how that works. It allows us to span the breadth of a situation, including a person and how they work, taking in all the particular visceral aesthetic cues and giving it deep meaning. And not just deep meaning for a person, sort of like a math to it. Taking humans and actually trying to figure out what are the real life RPG rules for this role-playing game. What are the rules of nature? What are the natural laws that make humans work? That desire actually helps a great deal with actually reading humans. And then, of course, the Nijai is also very naturally gifted at reading mojos as well. Again, because the Nezhez, as part of their storyline, it's very important that they actually know what the moods of others are in order to know how to best use their Zhez discernment power. So for that reason, if the Naiji is able to get in touch with their other, they'll have even more bonus stacking on their ability to read mojos. So within the PICN, the creating of it, there's going to be a need to have like an elite team of readers. I want any and all mojos who can and qualify for that. There should be any number of mojos doing that. But I, as the person who's leading up this Naiji temple, I expect us to produce a lot of elite readers. Okay, so the temples, they'll have their own ways, but here at Naiji Temple, if you're here with me, you are going to become an elite mojo reader, a soul reader. Naiji have a great vastness to the variety they have as far as manifesting, which is an awesome gift. But the awesomeness of the gift can be stunning. It can be confusing exactly what to do with it. There's a lot to this, and so in Padler theory, I like to give starting points. So starting point is the subsignals. For example, with Nai, there is the positive signals of being independent-minded, of having visionary drive, of being holding your own against opposition opinion. That's a good thing, but there's negatives to that, such as being an egomaniac, of driving too hard, trying to force something that's not there. Visionary drive is good, but trying to force something. And again, the sort of noble fanaticism that Nai provides, particularly when you combine it with Ji, that noble fanaticism is good if it's going the right way. If it's going the wrong way, then it's bad. So there's a fine line between being extremely persuasive and being belligerent. Now we're starting to bring in the Ji. There's a line between being diplomatic, being sensitive to people's feelings, and being deceitful, being manipulative. So we'll go over more of this, and this operates also over here, but we'll start primarily with these. But Zai is important as well, and V, because people who are V'd up and Zai'd up, a term we use a lot, that means that they're distinct signals that come from those powers, that they are not giving off a good signal. Kind of like an engine in a car. When it's not doing something correctly, it makes a bad sound, and a skillful mechanic, they can actually listen and almost tell what's wrong with the car, as a physician can with the person sometimes, just by these sort of external factors or this sort of keening sound. So we'll go over how the powers we have, the four conscious powers, how they give off those signals, and how to interpret feedback from the environment. That's important because not everyone's going to interpret your powers in a good light. So sometimes the reaction you're getting is because people don't interpret your signals correctly. Noble independence of mind can often ruffle feathers. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. But there's times, for example, when maybe you are bothering someone whose opinion, both as far as wisdom and as far as code of conduct and virtue and authenticity, you actually appreciate. And they're having a problem with your, say, independence of mind. They're maybe feeling that you are being egotistical. You'll want to get good at actually knowing, is that true? And what should I do about that? So that's a constant thing of your signals, being aware that your four powers, particularly your top two, they give out a constant signal, and how is the world reacting to that, and what does that mean? In popular theory, we use the 5 gears of mojo reading in order to teach the basics of how you read another person's mojo. The 4th gear involves dealing with riffs, which is when you can identify a similarity in a person's physiology or their development or the particular style in which they play their powers. And those who are trained in mojo reading, they would also pick this up independent of another person. They're like, yes, that similarity is there. The way you can compare, for example, certain Dutch masters, the way they paint, you can say that's like a Rembrandt. And if it actually is like a Rembrandt, those who are trained in those paintings and know what they look like, you're right, it does look like a Rembrandt. So that's a very powerful tool, and that can sound very clumsy, but actually done properly, it's a very fine artistic palette. So it's very sophisticated, very nuanced, very subtle. It's actually one that, as Nai Ji, you'll find one of your strongest. That's actually one of your absolute strongest, so it's one we'll spend a lot of time on. This includes classifying riffs of Nai Ji. There's all kinds of riffs, and most Nai Ji that you'll meet, they actually would fall in a multitude of riffs. So, for example, myself, I actually am all kinds of different riffs. I'm like a feral wizard. There's another one we call is like the BAM spectrum, which is the bearded angry man. There's a lot of Nai Ji that fall into that. They can be, you know, mathematicians. They can be, you know, singing artists. They can be revolutionaries. But the bearded angry man is actually quite popular. So these are nice shorthands that actually help identify a phenomenon that is there. I just happened to notice when reading Nai Ji that a lot of them are sporting the beard and they look intense. And it somehow seems to actually accentuate their independence of mind. That seems to be a vibe that goes along with that. So it's not just an aesthetics thing. There seems to be a certain energetics that goes along with that look. And so that's a shorthand. So that if you're seeing that, you can say, oh, there's a BAM. And if it is a BAM, that's a bearded angry man Nai Ji, then others who are trained can look and they can agree or disagree, and if they agree, you are all instantly like reading a work of art together. at a high level. You've made a high level compare and contrast on a work of art in a museum. That's what you just did, and that's the kind of way that the Naiji should always be looking at other humans, and that's how we'll train to do it here. Faux-Zen is a term you'll hear a lot, and that's because, as you've probably noticed already from part one, a lot of Naiji very fond of the Zai. So this actually gives them the feeling of, I'm in equilibrium. They're not, and it doesn't seem the same at all comparing a Naiji using a lot of Zai to an actual Zai mojo like a Demas. A Demas is a Zai-Ni. So when you look at him, that's what an actual Zai alpha looks like. Naiji are not like this, although a lot of them think they are. There's a lot of Naiji that think they're a Zai-Ni or a Zai-B or something of the sort, Shiny. That all comes from them thinking that equilibrium is where it's at. And equilibrium is very important, but for us, it's actually our offside priority. We call it Faux-Zen because, kind of like faux leather, Naiji tend to like to sell, to persuade, to pitch people on what they believe to be the better way. So for us, that involves pushing our concept of what truth is. A lot of Naiji have actually bumped into and created models where letting nothing bother you is the answer. And so there can be a belief that that is the thing to be, but that's not taking into account the unique peak pathway of the Naiji, which is why it's Faux-Zen, because in order to be that at equilibrium, you would actually have to be turning on your Zai to the extent that it was sublimating the Naiji, and that's just straight up mathematically incorrect. And so it's not going to be real Zen. It's going to be a chilly parking brake. The Nai Simulator is responsible for some amazing things on planet Earth, from architecture to artwork to scientific breakthroughs to good revolutions, bad revolutions. We'll get into some other stuff about that as well, but the Nai Simulator is a juggernaut of imagination. It's something that as a Naiji you'll want to become very, very familiar with and make your best friend, because it's like a visionary Hulk. And if you don't actually know what to do with it, it'll just go rampaging around in there. You probably all experienced that. If you're Naiji, you know what I'm talking about when your visionary Hulk goes on a rampage. So it's a good idea to actually know that that happens and actually understand it, and then you can kind of fly it like you're a dragon rider. But you'll have to know how to handle that creature. But that creature is actually you, so you're supposed to do that. Being a Naiji can be lonely, so we tend to have the lone wolf thing going on a lot. But we can have companionship, and we want companionship. We are Jimojos. Relationships are very important to us, but we tend to actually like to keep things rather small, tight, trustworthy, elite, special. We like it to be a spiritual connection. We like to be around people that we actually can feel that degree of trust and respect with. With the Naiji, there's definitely a phenomenon of like packing together like a collection of loners in order to do really extreme, cool stuff to get like spiritual highs. This can be almost anything. It can be scientific discovery, it can be extreme sports, it can be going into seclusion, but going on maybe like fasting or vows of silence with your close band of patrons. That's what we'll talk a lot about, and it's important to the Naiji, and it's actually a very good thing. But wolf packs, there is an etiquette to how you meet another wolf pack member, how you create a wolf pack, how the wolf pack interacts with having such large egos around. As you've seen, for example, in music, there's lots of Naiji music. We are extremely dominant in music, and therefore a lot of bands that you may be aware of have a lot of Naiji in them, where like there's like 3, 4, 5, 6 people in a band, and a lot of, sometimes all of them are Naiji. Some bands are able to do this successfully for years and it's happy. Others are not able to do it at all. And Sometimes you have people that actually have a band get together and break apart, and that's actually a good peaceful process that happens over time, and other times it's a chaotic, messy process. All of that is Wolfpack dynamics. In Naiji Temple, as with other temples, you'll be expected to experience the mentee-mentor relationship, so that you learn as a mentee, but you're expected to teach back as a mentor, both as a way of paying back the knowledge that you learned and as a way of actually sealing that knowledge into you, really making it a part of you. In order to do that, you don't just learn it, you have to teach it. If you're able to teach it, then that means that you yourself have actually digested it. This is especially important for Naiji because not only is the mentee-mentor relationship crucial for all mojos, the Naiji have a special affinity for the teacher-student relationship. We feel most comfortable in the role of a student or a teacher or both. And again, similar to Wolfpacks, there is an etiquette, a way of being the teacher, of being the student, and transitioning between the two and back and forth between the two. So as Naiji, you'll want to be very good at that because that's a cornerstone for the way your life operates. So if you do that quite well, your life will go well. If you don't, life will be difficult because not taking the world through the student-teacher dichotomy, not addressing the world in that way, will make things difficult because that's how you're made to do it. Although the world will often want to make the dichotomy of successful, unsuccessful, of leader, subordinate. But those are labels and contexts that actually cloud the primary one of most importance to the Naiji, which is teacher-student, which in the end, to be the best student, you actually must think like a teacher. And in order to be the best teacher, you must think like a student. And it sounds simple, but it's actually infinitely sophisticated in application. That's something that here at Naiji Temple we'll be doing a lot with, and we'll be doing with consistently in teaching others and learning from others, from other Naiji. As we expand the Naiji Temple, we'll be teaching them what we know about being Naiji, but in their lands and their ways, they have instinctually or through conscious thought exerted themselves to where they've learned how to do some cool Naiji stuff. We can learn tricks from them. And so we're always teaching and learning. And for us, it'll be the purest and most noble way to make and maintain friendships. The Naiji configuration creates a very complex nature. It's not mathematically more complex necessarily because all the mojos have 8 powers that have these relationships, so that math is the same as far as complexity. It's just in how it feels and in how it manifests. It can seem more complex than other mojos because there is a lot of intense activity that happens in here, and then when it transitions out here, it tends to be both not exactly what it seemed like it was going to go from in here. That's one element, and it's extreme. So for Naiji, going back to the simulator and things like that, what will come from our inner world to our outer world, it's going to be a vast gulf that we'll have to bridge. Also, on top of that, is the fact that because of that, the energy it takes for the Naiji to go from their inner world to the outer world is very far. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of visionary drive, a lot of willpower. What seems like normal to us will often catch other people as very extreme because we spend a lot of our time held within. Those resources are not often available to the world. The world's unaware of them. And then all of a sudden they will become in the world and it will be stunning to people. That surprise factor is a lot of our spells are based on that, which is cool. But we also have to know that it may affect the environment in negative ways that we don't want, and so we should be aware of when and where we set our spells off. This relates to the Ji of the Naiji, which can often seem quite different in the way it manifests from the Ji of the other Ji mojos, like the Vai Ji, the Jinai, and the Ji Vai. This is because our Ji is subordinate like the Vaiji is also, their Ji is subordinate to the worldview, but the worldview that we have is a conceptual, visionary, original, unprecedented, independent-minded worldview. And so it can come out in art, it can come out in music, it can come out in writing, it can come out in communing with nature, dealing with animals, taking care of a sacred piece of land. There's all kinds of ways that the Ji can have a very strong connection for a Nai-Ji, but other mojos, even other Ji mojos, wouldn't necessarily interpret that as Ji because it has such a visionary, artistic, and spiritual vibe to it. Monologuing. Yes, monologuing is fun. Monologuing is more than fun. It's necessary. It's like the life's blood for Nai-Ji. It's like, it's what you do with all your insights. Because you may have noticed that as a Nai-Ji, you're very interested in gaining insights and collecting them. And over time, you just have to do something with them. And that involves monologuing, which is actually a strong element of the Ji the Nai-Ji have, the way we like to do it. We like to actually store a lot up, and then when we start talking, and that be talking through painting, for example, we like to go. We like to write books, we like to do long projects, we like to actually set up institutions, we like to actually forge entire communities. These are all monologues of us to the world, of what we think natural law should be like. So yeah, that's kind of natural law teacher. Our natural law teacher likes to monologue, and there's so many ways that you can do that. Nai-Ji find pretty much anywhere they are. They can be in places where you're specifically trying to give them no access at all to being able to do that, and still they find a way. They find a way to teach, to monologue. You can monologue through silence. Silence can be a monologue. Refusing to eat can be a monologue. So there's lots of ways that a monologue can happen, and Nai-Ji are fond of and good at just about all of them. As part of the Nai-Ji temple, the Nai-Ji experience, the Nai-Ji awareness, is the anti-establishment vibe that the Nai-Ji have. This comes from having Zi and Vi as our furthest powers. They are the most unconscious to us, therefore they're the most foreign to us. This is not a good or bad thing, it's just simply the way we work. All mojos have powers that are the furthest for them. For us, that's those powers. It's Zi and Vi. This gives us an anti-establishment disposition. That is, our natural way is to look at Zi and Vi from the point of view of Nai and Ji, which are as far away from those two powers you can get, and be like, what are they doing? What are they about? And our natural position, since our two top powers, Nai and Ji, are completely opposite of those powers, we're inclined to find the most fault in the Zi and Vi in the world of other mojos. Compared to other mojos, for them, Zi and Vi is not as far away from them. From us, it's very far away. So we come from the point of view of what's it doing wrong, or why don't I have to listen to it? So, you know, all mojos have that they try to find reasons to not have to listen to their super offside and their super polar, or their unconscious offside or their unconscious polar. Like most things, it's not a question of good or bad, because it simply is, and it's amazing because we are evolved to be this heroic creature who has these special powers. It's a question of how do you deal with it, and when and why do you use it. So there can be noble revolution, change. I'll actually say more on the like reformation of evolution. So it is trying to change in the most positive, advantageous way. There is also a lot of Nai-Ji in the world that are doing it more just neutral, which is they just want to change in any way possible. sometimes you have to do extreme measures in order to make changes in areas where doing positive change, the weather is inclement there. It's inclement weather for doing positive change. So you do what you have to do, and Naiji come with the disposition of, if noble change needs to happen, you do what you got to do. So that's a good thing. However, sometimes that can be an excuse to just do what you feel like doing to a degree, and that's actually getting to where you're talking more about just anarchy. That's not really a revolution, that's just mayhem. Okay, so mayhem is not the same thing as a true revolution or reformation or evolution. And then going worse, and Naiji, I have to say, are here a lot too, is criminality. It has to be said that if you look at a lot of the homeless people, bums on the street, particularly ones that look a little intense, a lot of them are Naiji. A lot of the top criminal organization leaders, Naiji. A lot of the serial killers, Naiji. So that brings in other factors too, like the simulator gone wrong and a whole bunch of other crap. But it must be brought in that the Naiji have a special need and imperative to understand the way their powers work, because one, they can cause intense change in people's lives, which can be good or bad, and we want to make sure it's good, if at all possible. And the fact that Z and Vi is a lot of what you would call the powers that be. So there tends to be extreme repercussions from the powers that be when Naiji do what they do, particularly in the anti-establishment department. So it's important for you to know what you're doing in that way and why. Naiji are something that other models of thought have attempted to try and figure out. They have not done it right because they don't know how to read people. They don't know how to fit it in with the rest of natural law. They're quite clumsy. But they do actually make attempts, and when they do, they often, because they don't read people properly, the correlation, their model of the Naiji, which would be, for example, an MBTI, it would be sort of like an INFJ. In Kersey, I don't really call it, maybe is it like a protector or something like that, but it's the same thing, it's equivalent of the Naiji. And there's other models that also do it, and they have more or less correlations, but they often stereotype the Naiji, which you really can't do, because the Naiji's ability to take different forms and extreme manifestations of different forms really makes that nearly impossible to do. And then there's the fact that they pretty much universally say that the Naiji mojo, or what their correlations are, is the most rare. And from what we've seen, that actually isn't true. There's just a lot of reasons why Naiji misread themselves and others misread them. And so that will be a topic they will go into a lot, because it's very, very important for Naiji to know themselves and for others to know us. Laziness. This is something that is really interesting, because Naiji actually had visionary drive, and when that's turned on, it's difficult to actually match the output that a Naiji is going to do. I mean, it pretty much always borders or exceeds human ability, what's known to be human ability up to that point. But when that's not engaged, which can be two reasons: one, because the peak pathway is not going correctly, or we are in a percolating period. Naiji spent a lot of time in percolation periods. So during those times, there's not much going on, and people who want sort of consistent output, they'll sometimes have difficulty dealing with the Naiji, or the Naiji may cater for that, that expectation, but then they're going to be innervated. That's going to require a lot of Xi and a lot of V on a regular basis in order to give some sort of like consistent unit of output. Naiji don't come that way. All mojos have a peaking to them, like peak athletes, but Naiji, their way demands that you look at like a peaking workout cycle. If you actually try, like as a metaphysical athlete, if you try and actually grind an IG through a very consistent workload, you'll get nowhere. We just don't operate that way. If you allow for the percolation and the building of the percolation to a culmination point, those culmination points will add up to output that other humans have a hard time actually matching. Our record-breaking performances in just about every field attest to that. Bad memory. Lots of Naiji have this issue, although many other Naiji are confused on this because they've worked their Phenomena in a way that they're able to imitate the results of Vi. It's not actually Vi. They've actually managed to do a very high-level spell, which is cool they can do that, but they are confusing what's going on, and they're lifting a lot of weights that they may not realize they're lifting, that could be used for other things that are more natural and more productive and more powerful for the Naiji to be doing. So lifting like what you consider to be classic memory, that's our 8th power. That is the least effective power for us, but we are masterful. All the hunters, they actually have a great importance in their psyche placed upon being masterful in some way. So those are 4 different ways. However, of the 4 hunters, the Vizi's masterful ways are the ones that are most obviously apparent to application for the powers that be. And the Naiji is the one that it's least obvious how your masterfulness is useful to the world. So often Naiji will attempt to mimic or imitate the mastery of one of the other hunters. That's very, very, very common. So again, that causes for a lot of misreading of the Naiji by themselves and others. All Naiji are HSP. It's just a question of how much and how aware they are of it. There are a multitude of reasons for having HSP, and the Naiji have just about all of them. I mean, if you were to bonus stack a person to have HSP, Naiji took all those options. So that's something you have to just accept as a given and get an understanding of how to use it, what to do with this HSP, what does it mean, what's its purpose. So in short, and there's a lot to it, we'll go in a lot of detail on this, but the HSP is what gives the Naiji their great vulnerability and their great ferocity, which together gives them a unique set of powers that no other Mojo has. I guess you could say it is our vulnerability that makes us so ferocious. It is our yin that makes us so yang. We are the yinnest of all the yang directed Mojos. So we are a directed Mojo, but we have the most sensitive, vulnerable way, but it ends up that our culmination, our ferocious apex, is therefore correspondingly massive, volcanic, in correlation to the yin percolation time of the Nai yang power. It's a yang power, it's a directed power. There's a reason for having the HSP, the polar V. There's a lot of reasons. In fact, Zai is really the one conscious power that helps out with the HSP, which is why our Zai works for a living. Oh my goodness, it works for a living. Kenseiing, that's a term you'll hear thrown out a lot. Any Mojo can do that. Being a Kensei or Kenseiing is when you take any worldly form, any worldly activity, any worldly experience or discipline, and use that as a way to like tunnel a portal into understanding everything, life, existence, meaning, what it's all about. Naiji have a natural propensity for this, and that's something we'll discuss a lot, is how different Naiji, they Kensei on different things. You can pretty much be a Kensei in anything. For example, there's like the ability to take elephants. There's a guy that we saw on TV who was like an elephant expert, and he pretty much was a very deep, profound guy that actually got that deep understanding from the elephants. He kept understanding the elephants more, but the more he understood them, in order to be a perfect, absolutely perfect, masterful, spiritually pure elephant expert, you kind of have to know about everything. That's kind of how Kenseiing works. In order to actually become the absolute best piano player that is like humanly or inhumanly possible, you end up having to kind of become a productively harmonious human, period. Because you can't actually be a Kensei of anything without becoming a noble, heroic individual. So that's good for all mojos, but the Naiji, having Nai as the source and V as the polar, have a particular interest and necessity for the Kensei process. Yes, Naiji frenzy, we do. There's no way around that. And it's off the charts. If there was a frenzy contest, Naiji would win. It wouldn't matter what frenzy contest, we would win that one. So this is something that just has to be dealt with, and first is awareness. A lot of Naiji aren't aware that they have that, or they keep it, they're not aware, they keep it locked down, or they let it out for the wrong reasons. Okay, those are all wrong. The right answer is knowing what it is and letting it out for the right occasions, and then putting it back until it's needed again. And understanding that that is something that has to be let out on a consistent basis, like an artist that has to get its imagination, its inspiration, spurred and building up, but then it'll have to erupt. So these eruptions, they tend to look like frenzies. They're technically actually rather Naiji metaphysical energy surges, but they come out at V. The world will see often an extreme version of V. Now, this is something that actually can be confusing because even the first three methods are wrong, as I mentioned, which is not knowing what it is, trying to hold it in all the time, or letting it out wrong. Is even people who actually frenzy correctly, Naiji tend to have that be related to what they have gone Kensei on, or other life experience factors. So the different frenzies that Naiji can do will look quite different from another one until you know how to look at it. Once you actually know how to read any Naiji that you would come across as a Naiji, it doesn't matter, you know that's a Naiji, then the different kinds of frenzy and the different kinds of Kensei, they won't seem different either. But you'll have to understand the universal principles that are at play so you can do it better yourself. Naiji tend to actually have a fixation on being great, even if that has a spiritual context for them. Still, they want to really be spiritual. They want to be the most spiritual person who ever did spiritual stuff, which is great. And that actually lends Naiji the propensity for breaking a lot of records. Naiji probably hold the record. So far, the data showing that they hold the record for world records, and it's been trending that way for a while. So that's awesome, but then there has to be dealt with the fact that if you aren't quite where you want to be yet, that's a very uncomfortable experience for Naiji when they are trying to achieve greatness of spirit. The desire to get there and not having arrived yet, it's an intense pain and it's an agony that must be endured in order to get where you need to go. But there's a lot to that, a lot to being able to handle it, a lot to being able to use it correctly, that angst. But then, once you have achieved it, because Naiji have such an interest in greatness and doing unprecedented work and gaining renown for having done something truly original and exceptional, once you've achieved that, other humans treat you different. And that's something you have to deal with, is you're going to feel an intense weight on yourself as you try to reach the goal of greatness, first greatness, second greatness, multiple greatnesses. But then once you have cleared a greatness line, you will introduce a weight into the environment. When you walk into the room, there is a heaviness that you will introduce that you'll have to account for when you're dealing with other humans. Naiji have great powers of persuasion, of charisma. You can call it manipulation when it goes wrong. But a term we'll throw around a lot that kind of encapsulates that is mind jobbing. And this actually sometimes has a negative connotation, but the way we use it doesn't mean negative. It can be, but it also can be extremely positive. It's simply a phenomenon, which is that Naiji are built to do a job on other humans' minds. We're designed that the way we think and the way we express what we think will profoundly shift the perceptions and hopefully the code of conduct of those that we're talking to. Their perceptions and code of conduct for their life. So a good teacher, and Naiji make great teachers, will mind job their students. They will do a mind job on that student so that student learns, say, virtue. You'll get to where, man, they won't ever not want virtue again. I'll make it to where they're like, you kind of like give them a little thing where they see what it's like to be a person without virtue. And they're like, I don't want to be that person. And you're like, see, good. That's mind job. That's positive mind jobbing. I mean, you would make it a painful person if you can, but the point is that you're actually going to attempt to go in and change the way they think. You're trying to turn the tumblers of their psyche, and you're built to do that. So it's important that you know that, but that you know what an incredible responsibility that is, because as a Naiji, you have the ability to see insights and angles on people that when you start pushing buttons, they might not be the same ever after that. And that can be awesome, or that can be awful, and you have to take responsibility for that. For a variety of reasons, there are a lot of Naiji in pop culture. The Naiji, both the male and the female, are, for the male demographic and female demographics, they are the most represented mojo in pop culture. Which is interesting because, as I mentioned, other models actually place the Naiji as having a great rarity. So you're like, which one is it? I think the Naiji are pretty much about as represented as the other mojos are as far as natural, birth rates and whatnot. But there is the issue of our desire to actually monologue in artistic, spiritual ways, philosophical ways. We want to move people. Often you need to get into positions where you have great sort of public sway. And for that reason, Naiji, although most of us are very, very shy, we still will sometimes strive to get into those kinds of positions to where people listen to what we say. That's important to us. And so if you look around for us, in pop culture, you'll see a lot of us because that's the field we play in. But not all mojos actually do that. So it may even seem like there's Naiji everywhere. Well, in pop culture, we're actually quite common. There are lots of reasons that the Naiji get misread, are extremely complex, are confusing to themselves and others, but the one above all is probably our gift for being a chameleon, for being a secret agent, to shift into characters in order to be optimized for given engagement. The fact that we think in those terms. So that's an awesome power, but it needs to be treated correctly because Naiji in general, most Naiji tend to have extreme opinions on the subject that are inaccurate. Some actually take the point of view that being chameleon-like, shifting your character is a character flaw, and you shouldn't do it. You should have, they have somehow got the feeling from the world maybe teaching them that they need a great homogeny in themselves. That's actually vying. That's the world actually vying them. So Naiji need to know that is an incorrect way to go. Then other Naiji go the other route, which is everyone's a chameleon and those that don't know that are suckers. That's also incorrect, which is basically like, I'm allowed to use my chameleon power for any fucking thing I want to. That's incorrect also. So the best way to think about it is that in order to do art, in order to teach, in order to be the ideal deliverer of a delicate, very important, sensitive message. that shape-shifting ability that Naiji has evolved us to do those duties. In the human tribe, we're gifted at doing those things. So that's the noble use of it. So if you think in those terms, then that would mean using your shape-shifting to like con people or, you know, mind job them, play mentalist on them. That actually is not what you're supposed to be doing with the power. Not that mentalists are bad, but it's very like, I was actually referring to like the mentalist from TV, specifically him because he was bad, Patrick Jane. He's awesome, but he's naughty. So you're not supposed to be using your mentalist powers like that. You're supposed to use the fact that you have those insights into others and that you can present yourself in ways that you know will get certain reactions. Naiji are able to move, in fact, off their spirits, powerfully move them to contort into these forms. They almost feel like, I don't want to, but I'm becoming this creature in this situation. You need to understand what the process is and take control of it so that you don't say it's bad and try to chain it down, because that won't work. We're way too shifty for that. We'll get out. The chameleon power, you can't chain it. It won't work. And so that's awesome. You can't chain an IG. Even if you physically chain them, you haven't chained them. So that's the beauty of it. So don't try to actually, you know, smother that beauty. Then on the other hand, you're making that beauty ugly when you use it just to get over on other humans. That's not what it's supposed to be there for. It's actually supposed to be there to help yourself and other humans go to higher places, both out in the world and metaphysically, to get to higher vistas. That's why it evolved. Having Nye Visionary Drive and the awesome simulator that we do, being Visionary Hawks, and the fact that we have the Flex Factor, we're moody. This moodiness, like a lot of the Naiji powers, is something that you simply must understand, be aware of its comings and goings, and learn how to summon it and ride it correctly. If you attempt to hold it down, that either won't work at all, or you'll just be innervated by trying to hold that swing down so much when it wants to swing up. On the other side is, if you actually let it go free, then you'll go off the rails. You will go off the rails and you will do things that you will regret. So you have to take responsibility for your moods. So you want to use them and use them correctly. Naiji, along with the Zai-V, have a high propensity for being dissociated. That's having Nai and Zai as their conscious subjective powers, and being subjective mojos as well, which means we like to stay in our subjective world more than coming out. So dissociation is a power that, again, is not good or bad. It's heroic. It's supposed to be used good, but it's a tool. It's a tool that you're supposed to use heroically, but it can be used not heroically. So you need to know how the tool works and what the heroic purpose is. So for Naiji, that includes disassociation, because disassociation allows Naiji to go the correct way when they're being told by the world that they're going the wrong way. So it's good to not care in that context. But then if it goes too far, you can fall in love with not caring. And that's a bad thing. That means you become disassociated in the negative, or sort of like clinical definition of the term. That's bad. So disassociation is part of the Naiji experience because of having Nai and Zai as their conscious subjective powers. But it's a power that's meant to be used to help yourself to be a better person and to help the tribe be better people. The doctrine of directedness is often a direct counterpoint to Fozen. Some Naiji actually believe that their intensity is something they have to lock down, and when they do that, they go Fozen. Then there's the other route, which is that, no, I don't need to lock my intensity down. Everyone else has to be intense as me when they're weak. And these type of Naiji who are confused and don't have a good connection with their other, their Nijai other, they are thinking that anything that's not like them is incorrect, and so often they will pair up as far as like a significant other, a lover, with another Naiji or a Nai-Z or Jinai or Baiji or whatever, but they basically double down on directedness, which is the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be going with your other. You're supposed to take your natural powers and growing them in order to connect with your other. But if you actually take on a significant other, for example, that actually is the same mojo you are, it can seem very comfortable, but actually you are preventing yourself from going where you're supposed to be going. So ironically, double directives generally think that they are super strong and other people are weak. Actually, they're weak because they have not been able to be strong enough to be the hero they need to be to connect with their other alone. This is because the world and its inclemency has seemed so dire and so daunting to these kinds of Naiji that they have doubled down on their powers. It's like the idea, whether they know they're doing this or not, the idea of actually extending all the way out to your 8 powers is too much. It's too daunting. That's too great a task for you to handle those kinds of Naiji. And so they basically decide to just do what they do on their conscious powers and stay in that small constricted pond. And they believe that makes them stronger. This is actually quite common, and it's something we'll have to deal with a lot because there are a lot of what we call Naiji power couples, where they pair up with another Naiji or another directive like themselves, and the couple is very good at maybe excelling in a given field. They're both maybe highly respected with a lot of acclaim. This is very, very common, and so that can be confusing because that can seem like, oh, they're doing the right thing by being double directed because they're getting a lot of worldly success. No, they've just actually become lopsided on directedness, and that's something we'll have to talk about a lot because Naiji can become preoccupied with how to deal with the world. Dealing with the world is a big concern for Naiji, so it needs to be done correctly because other options can present themselves and seem like that's the way to go, and they're incorrect. Naiji have anger. This anger is actually the artistic sort, although it can move on up to spiritual, which is what it's meant to do, or it can descend in just physical violence. Naiji need to understand they do have issues with anger that they'll have to deal with and channel. Otherwise, they'll have to deal with depression or collateral damage in their life due to intense outbursts of anger. Even just getting the voice raised. When Naiji get angry, even just without physical violence, the energy that comes off of us is alarming to other humans. That's a good thing when we're actually trying to teach a class, for example, or move someone with an artistic work. We want to make it to where we are unfucking forgettable. So that's a good thing, but we have to make sure it's done in the right context, or we'll be unforgettable the way we wish we were forgettable. Sub-ROMs. This is a social alchemy that is not one of the official 20. It's actually technically within the Romantics. The Naiji and the Jaini are both Romantics, but those two mojos share a lot of similarities, so we refer to them together as a pair often, and we call them the sub-ROMs, the subjective Romantics. And this is one because, for example, the Naiji, as a Naiji male, the Naiji male and the Jaini male, or the Naiji female and Jaini female, often get confused in mojo reading. So it's important to actually know the differences between the Naiji and the Jaini. One, so you can be a better friend to that mojo, but also so you can better understand your nature, because a lot of sort of story tropes in movies and whatnot, and books, and the way people interact, they often confuse the two sub-ROMs. So you may find yourself having a sub-ROM story put on you that's not you. It's often because people confuse unconsciously, for example, a Naiji with a Jaini, they'll unconsciously treat you as if you were that. So it's important you actually know what you are, what signals you're giving off, particularly signals that can be easily confused. That goes back to social alchemy, for example, of two other mojos like the Naiji and the Jinai. Those are mojos that we can easily be confused with, both ourselves and others. So it's important that you not be confused by that, because that will make sure that you have a good awareness of self. So sub-ROMs is another one. You want to make sure you know the similarities and the differences. And by being able to compare and contrast those two mojos really well, the Naiji and the Jiani, it's very beneficial for learning about yourself. Another of these informal social alchemies is the Jez Hunters. The Naiji and Vaiji are what we call Jez Hunters, and they're both part of the Hunter group, and they're both part of the Jez Mojos. So they are already in two groups together, but they kind of occupy a special duo together, which is they're the only two Mojos that actually have a worldview followed up by Ji. And so for this reason, they share a lot in common, and they also can come into a unique form of conflict with each other because they actually do hunt in similar waters. And so it's important that we know how to identify the differences between a Naiji and a Vaiji, so you know for sure what you are, and that you know how to deal with the Vaiji so that you actually can have a good Jez Hunter relationship. So the more you're able to understand how a given relationship is supposed to work, the better it can work. And the Naiji and Vaiji friendship is an important one. Another informal one is the Naiji with the Zaini. The Naiji actually often enjoy friendships with both the Xi Alpha, the Xi V, as mentioned with the cave dwelling and the dissociation, but we also enjoy hanging out with the Zaini. The difference is the kinds of activities that are preferred. You can think of the Naiji with Xi V as sort of like survivalistic cave dwellers, and the Naiji with Zaini as more like experimental lab partners. So there's a lot of fun that Naiji and Zaini do together, composing music, scientific experiments, all kinds of things. And this is actually, I guess, a subgroup of the Special Club, because both the Naiji and Zaini are in the subjective interpretives, but they're the subjective interpretives that also like Xi. They enjoy Xi and Ji, and so for that reason, there is a special kind of bond they have when they're doing lab work together. And so that's what we'll talk about as well. Now that you've been exposed to a lot of the major topics that will be discussed in Naiji Temple, it's time to sort of take a look at some practical application. And we're going to use the virtual village a lot, which will come from the show that Jaileen's doing, the Mojo Show. In there, there's going to be a lot of Mojos, and the Naiji are one of the most populous. So that's an advantage for you as Naiji, is there's quite a few Naiji for you to look at, again, because we're so popular in pop culture. But that's something that you should start doing right away, is watching lots of videos of Naiji. That's the quickest way to start getting an idea of what we look like and the great variety of our manifestations. So that's a tool put up there for you, and Jaileen's working very hard to have that available for you, and so you should really take advantage of that. We will use these celebrities to reference things a lot, because oftentimes when trying to explain to another Naiji, for example, like how their powers work or what they're supposed to do in a given situation, the way you would do it is that if we knew someone in common, like a Naiji, like say several Naiji, I would reference like how so-and-so did such and such when they were somewhere, right? Remember that time? Right, that's how humans naturally talk. It's a very natural dialogue. And it's a very good way to talk about a very nuanced subject such as the human condition.